historic decision has just been made in Australia. For the first time in decades, the government in Canberra officially announced full recognition of the state of Palestine. The announcement on August 11, 2025, immediately shook the stage of international diplomacy. Not only did it become a hot topic in the Middle East, but it also triggered sharp reactions from Israel. This recognition came amid a humanitarian emergency in Gaza, where millions of residents face a food crisis caused by aid restrictions. The Australian government stressed that the main reason behind the decision was humanity. They argued too many lives have been lost, the world has remained silent for too long, and it is now Australia's turn to take a stand. Public reaction was equally striking. Thousands of demonstrators filled Sydney's iconic Harbour Bridge, carrying banners of solidarity with the Palestinian people. The massive demonstration was a key factor influencing the government's move. But such a bold decision does not come without consequences. Australia-Israel relations are now at their lowest point in decades. The Israeli government responded with immediate protest, signaling the beginning of a new chapter of diplomatic tensions with no clear end in sight. Israel's reaction came swiftly and fiercely. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Australia of a major betrayal of their long-standing friendship. He labeled Prime Minister Anthony Albanese a weak leader, too easily swayed by public pressure, and incapable of safeguarding regional stability. His words ignited heated debates across international media, reflecting the seriousness of the diplomatic rupture. But Israel did not stop at rhetoric. Within 48 hours of Australia's announcement, Israel revoked visas for several Australian diplomats stationed in the West Bank. This direct retaliatory move severely limited Canberra's diplomatic activity in the conflict zone, leaving many international agencies in confusion. Israel also cancelled an official parliamentary visit to Canberra, making it clear the rift was not symbolic but practical. Israeli media amplified the anger, calling Australia's decision a betrayal of democracy and support for terrorism. Back in Australia, however, public opinion strengthened in support of their government. Quick surveys in Sydney showed more than 60% of Australians backing Palestine recognition. For many, Israel's fury confirmed that their government was finally on the right side of history. Public support in Australia continued to grow. In cities like Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth, peaceful rallies filled the streets with banners reading "Justice for Palestine" and "Humanity First." This was no fleeting protest. It reflected a deeper shift in national sentiment. Students, academics, and interfaith groups united to insist Australia could no longer ignore Gaza's suffering. An academic from the University of Sydney called the move a historical correction. He argued that the West, including Australia, had for too long defended Israel's policies without accountability. His statement gained wide media coverage, strengthening the moral weight behind the government's decision. Humanitarian organizations welcomed the recognition, saying it would open doors for larger aid flows into Gaza, where famine had reached catastrophic levels. According to UN data, over 70% of Gaza's residents are now facing extreme hunger. Still, critics remained. Conservative voices warned the move carried national security and trade risks, potentially isolating Australia from key allies. Yet for most Australians, the humanitarian imperative outweighed those risks. Ultimately, the decision symbolized a new chapter in Canberra's foreign policy, one that prioritizes humanity even at the cost of diplomatic fallout. The impact of Australia's decision quickly spread beyond its borders. International media spotlighted the move, especially in Western nations usually cautious about recognizing Palestine. In London and Toronto, protests highlighted Australia as a precedent, urging their own governments to follow. Headlines across global outlets echoed, "Australia breaks the silence." Middle Eastern states responded positively. Egypt, Turkey, and Qatar praised Canberra's decision, calling it a turning point for Palestinian diplomacy. Turkey's foreign minister declared it proof that Israel's Western narrative was beginning to collapse. The United States, however, expressed unease. Washington reaffirmed its commitment to a two-state solution but criticized Australia for acting unilaterally. The White House warned the move could undermine fragile peace talks, signaling tension between Canberra and its closest ally. Israel, meanwhile, felt increasingly isolated. International scrutiny of its Gaza policy intensified, fueled by Australia's recognition. On social media, hashtags like #StandWithAustralia and #FreePalestine began trending globally, illustrating a shift in public opinion. Australia's decision had become more than a national policy. it was a symbol of a changing global conversation. Beyond politics, economic concerns began to surface. While Israel is not one of Australia's largest trading partners, cooperation in technology, agriculture, and cybersecurity has long been strategically important. Now, with diplomatic ties collapsing, those partnerships face an uncertain future. Israel hinted at reviewing all trade agreements with Australia. Analysts warned this could cost Australian companies hundreds of millions in investments, particularly in the tech sector. Some speculated allied nations close to Israel might also apply indirect economic pressure on Canberra. Economists noted the short-term impact may be limited, but long-term effects could disrupt key sectors. Cybersecurity, for example, may experience setbacks without Israeli partners. Australia would need to turn to Asia or Europe for alternatives, a transition unlikely to be smooth. Supporters of the government countered that moral values must outweigh temporary economic losses. They argued Australia's economy is resilient enough to withstand the shock, while also highlighting opportunities to deepen ties with Asia-Pacific markets. The debate underscored how this was not just a foreign policy decision, but also a test of Australia's economic resilience and political courage. Domestically, the decision tested Anthony Albanese's leadership. Critics in Parliament accused him of chasing popularity, ignoring long-term strategic risks. They argued foreign policy should not be shaped by street protests but by national interests. Yet polls told another story. Public approval of Albanese surged after the announcement. Analysts said he successfully reframed the issue, not as geopolitics, but as a moral question for all Australians. Within his own party, hesitant members began aligning with him as public sentiment grew. Others, however, voiced concern, especially those connected to pro-Israel groups. Heated debates in Parliament highlighted deep divides. Outside Parliament, civil groups and faith leaders praised the Prime Minister, calling him courageous for placing humanity above politics. Some commentators even suggested this decision could become Albanese's defining legacy. The move reshaped Australia's domestic political landscape, marking a turning point not only abroad but also at home. In Gaza, Australia's recognition carried powerful symbolism. It did not stop the fighting or immediately open aid corridors, but for many Palestinians it was a light of hope. Local media hailed it as a moral victory, proof they were not forgotten. Aid organizations said Canberra's move could pressure Israel to ease its blockade. The UN suggested it might speed humanitarian access to food and medicine. Conditions remain dire. Over 70% of medical facilities are non-functional, while child malnutrition has skyrocketed. For Palestinians enduring such hardship, international recognition is about dignity as much as statehood. For decades, many felt ignored on the global stage. Australia's recognition gave them new confidence that broader acceptance may follow. While peace is still distant, the decision rekindled optimism that the world will no longer remain silent on Gaza's suffering. Within Australia, the decision reverberated among its diverse communities. The Jewish diaspora, particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, expressed deep concern. Leaders warned it might fuel anti-Semitism, urging the government to ensure domestic harmony. By contrast, Palestinian and Arab Australian communities celebrated with prayer gatherings, cultural parades, and public forums. They called it a day of justice, sharing family stories of loss in Gaza. Tensions rose as both communities clashed in heated debates, though largely peacefully. Authorities urged unity, reminding citizens not to import foreign conflicts into Australian streets. Interfaith groups stepped in to mediate, organizing dialogues to build understanding between Jewish and Palestinian representatives. Though reconciliation remains difficult, such efforts reflected Australia's determination to preserve social cohesion despite geopolitical storms. Australia's recognition of Palestine will be remembered as a defining moment. In the long term, it could reshape how the world views Canberra, not as a follower of Western consensus, but as an independent moral voice. This bold move creates both risks and opportunities. Tensions with Israel and possible strains with Washington loom ahead, yet new partnerships may open across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. For many states advocating Palestinian recognition, Australia's stance elevates its credibility as a principled partner. For Palestinians, the decision could trigger further recognition by other Western nations. For Australia, it cements a new identity, one that dares to challenge entrenched alliances in the name of justice. Domestically, the policy will continue testing Anthony Albanese's leadership. If he balances diplomacy with stability, this could become his greatest legacy. If not, it may be remembered as his most dangerous gamble. What is certain is that Australia has shifted the diplomatic landscape. The world now watches to see whether this marks the beginning of a path toward peace, or a new chapter of deepened international conflict.